This lesson discusses the journey of homeownership and some of the unexpected things life can throw at you along the way. Specific to this lesson, students will understand the basics of home buying, as well as be able to determine the pros and cons to both renting and homeownership. Learn that life doesn't always go according to plan, but that bad circumstances can be mitigated by planning ahead. And see the importance of building an emergency fund for the completely unexpected.
So home ownership. Anybody ever want to buy a home?
Yeah.
Ideally.
I'd like to have a house someday.
So by this point in the simulator, you've done what? You have maybe gone to college, you've started a career, maybe you've gotten married, had a baby, got a dog, you've done all kinds of different things. But we haven't really gotten into buying a home. What are some reasons that people want to buy versus rent?
So that you can own it outright.
Okay. And what does that mean?
It means that, like if you are able to buy the land that the house is on, the bank will have a harder time to repossess it if you have any financial problems.
Okay, so you don't have any more payments.
Right.
It's an investment. You can resell it later, hopefully, for a return.
Okay. What else?
Well, when you're paying your rent for your apartment, that money isn't really going towards anything except for that month's rent versus
Right.
a monthly payment on a home.
Okay.
Stability.
How so?
You know, you have one thing that's like when you own like property or when you own something, like no one can take it away from you, and it's like you have this one thing that's like yours and it'll always be there, and it's kind of like, so basically it's just like it's an investment, right? And it's like
You have
just
control.
like it's just like stability. Like, yeah, you don't have to like worry about like where you're gonna sleep or like, you know, what you're gonna, you know, where
Right.
you're gonna like shower, like where you're gonna host events and stuff. I
Yeah.
don't know, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you can plan ahead.
Yeah, like
Right.
you can build a family. Like once you have like having a home is like having like stability. You can build a family, and you know you have a venue for like parties and stuff.
Okay. Sure.
When you're renting something, usually there's like a lease or some sort of contract that says you can't do this, you can't like build upon your own property, you can't, there are a lot of, there are a lot of restrictions.
Sure.
But once you actually own it for yourself, you can pretty much do whatever you want within the cities or wherever you live's limits.
Yeah. So you guys talk a lot about maybe what the great things of home ownership are. What do you think the cons of owning a house are?
One of the first things that came to mind for us was like the upkeep of owning a house. So you would have to pay all the additional things, like, you know, landscaping or any maintenance that's needed, opposed to when you rent, that's kind of part of it.
Right.
If
Exactly.
your sink breaks, you have to call the plumber, not the landlord.
Okay. What else?
You need good credit to get a loan.
So you need to be able to buy the house.
Yeah.
It's a little stressful, right? Does anyone want to add anything?
It's more difficult to like move like locations. You have to stay and you're kind of like planted there for
So it's a commitment
commitment to location.
to the location.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if something changes, like your job or
Can your mortgage be rise if the environment changes?
it depends.
Get readjusted.
So if you have a fixed rate, it's
Fixed
locked
rate?
in for a
Okay.
certain period of time.
Yeah.
But if you have an adjustable rate,
Yeah.
that's the interest rate, not the they call it the principal balance, wouldn't change
And you-
for payments.
Okay. Another con is you have to pay taxes, right, on the house.
Taxes.
Insurance, landscape.
Yep, we have landscaping, so taxes, insurance. So basically just more costs and maybe the mortgage is fixed, but you have a variety of things and surprises, the roof, the furnace, plumbing, electrical, all of these different things. So then kind of coming off of that, what do you think some of the pros of renting are?
You want to like, if adventure is your like top priority, you can move really easily whenever
Right.
you want.
Right?
And if you're not locked into a contract, like a year,
lease.
a lease, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah. You're spending less short term. Because you're not locked into having to spend a certain amount per month leading up to the total amount of the home. Less commitment worries about the house, apartment, condo itself, and the landlord or management company takes care of the property some of the time.
Something
depending on-
breaks, the grass is growing too long, you just call them up and say, hey, I need you to come over here and take care of this. When you
Yeah.
own a home,
It's
you
all
just have
you.
to call yourself, I guess.
That's right.
Anything else that anyone can think of? All right, we'll move on to cons.
Cons.
Okay, so the cons to renting.
It's completely sunk cost.
Okay.
So just as when you're leasing a car, you're not actually, unless you're leasing to own or renting to own, in which case, you have to put that in the contract. You're just throwing money out to use something. There's no return on renting anything. As well, you have landlords. As much good they can do for you, they can also really be a huge obstacle.
Okay.
Yeah.
How so?
An
Do you have a personal
obstinate
experience
obstacle.
with renting that you feel
Well,
comfortable
landlords,
sharing?
can increase rent after a year. They can,
There's
maybe they haven't
stipulations.
maintained, maybe they add on stipulations to your property that you're not allowed to use it for all the things you might want to use it for.
And they may not work in the amenities that you need.
They might be,
Yeah.
just as if they might take care of the things that you ask them to do, they might also take a while to repair things. And,
Right.
They can be a blessing or a curse.
And also, things in landlords is that if they have a personal vendetta against you, you don't have a house.
It's
You don't have
true.
a place to stay
It's true.
anymore. Or if they aren't as patient with your payments, then you're still without.
You get evicted.
Right, you could get
You
evicted.
can't get
You're
well,
at the
you can
will
get your
of
house
somebody
foreclosed,
else.
but you can't get evicted from your house.
Right.
You can't, there's no return of investment. Like if you're paying all this money and there's no, you're not investing into the property, there's no return. You can't
Right,
get
so you
anything.
move out,
Yeah,
that's it. You go somewhere else and you start paying rent somewhere else. You
Yeah,
can't
exactly.
sell it, get that money back.
You're just in a
You can't profit from like everything you're putting into the
I
into the
feel like-
property because you don't own.
I feel like as they may have said that maybe renting is only a good option if you have roommates or if it's for school or if it's for travel. Like I feel like if you rent, it should just be a temporary thing. It's like it shouldn't be like staying there for
Renting till you're 40.
And it depends, right? So to your point, if adventure is your number one priority and you want to be able to just kind of at a month's notice or when your lease is up, be able to move to the other side of the country and you don't have to worry about trying to find someone to sublet the house or rent from you. You don't want to be a landlord. You just want to say, hey, I'm going to Hawaii. I want to teach surfing, like maybe we saw in the graphic novel, right? We go to Hawaii and we say, this is where I'm going to be for 6 to 12 months. And if I don't like it, I can go back to the West Coast or end up in the Midwest, and it doesn't tie you down. Now, if you have a job where you make really good money and you travel a lot for work, maybe it makes sense not to be paying a huge mortgage or even a reasonably sized mortgage for a house that you aren't in that often, right? So you have this big house, or you could just have a small apartment that gives you some flexibility. And so it goes back to what?
your personal preference and situation. At
You know the word I'm
time.
looking for.
Priorities.
Priorities.
Right.
It all goes back to your priorities. So if you are focused on adventure or if you're focused on family and security, it's going to determine your quality of life and how happy you are with what your decisions are, right? So you guys talk a lot about maybe what the great things of home ownership are. And has anybody ever pictured what they want their home to look like?
Yeah.
All of you?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Not everybody. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. You could close your eyes for a second if you'd like, but you can picture what you want in your home, or this could be a condo, something that you own, what that looks like. Is it a single family? Is it a multi-family? Is it near the water? Is it something that's downtown? It's in a big city. Maybe it's on a dirt road, a dead end, a cul-de-sac, right? Get that in your head and then go on to, have you ever been on Zillow?
Yeah.
Okay. So go on Zillow and search for that type of home. So whether it's a single family, a multifamily, or a condo in the area that you'd like. So if it's downtown or out in the suburbs, think of how many bedrooms you want, how many bathrooms.
More than one.
More than one bathroom?
Yes. Live in a family of 6. You don't want one bathroom.
No. Take a few minutes and see what's available out there. And then also make note of the price. Has anyone been on these types of websites? You familiar with what kind of the house of, and this doesn't necessarily have to be your dream home, you know, the 3-car garage and the couple acres of land, if that's what you're picturing, or the $1 million condo downtown, but something that at this point in your life, so you're in your mid to late 30s, you may or may not have a few children or a pet that you want to get. You talked a little bit about some of the restrictions when renting. If you own, you can pretty much do whatever you want. What are you thinking over here? Did you find something that you liked?
So I was looking at this $18 million. I mean, I know it's like not. It's the first thing that popped up, but it looks.
Okay.
It's got 4 beds, 5 baths.
Now think back to the exercise that we did where we looked at how much money we thought we were going to make over our entire lifetime.
That's not even. That's like 12 lifetimes.
Okay,
So
so
this is
let's
not-
keep that in mind when we're going through the exercise, that we want to be reasonable. We want the mortgage payment to be something that we could afford on a monthly and annual basis. Take into consideration that if you did get married, you chose to have a live-in partner or spouse, you would have an additional income, so you could take that into consideration. But an $18 million home may or may not be reasonable to look at right now.
I found a cute home.
A cute home. All right, tell me about
Well,
it.
it's on Nutmeg Circle, and my cat's name is Cashew, so I feel like Nutmeg and Cashew. Anyways, it's 4 beds and 3 baths, and the mortgage is $1,000 per month.
$1,000 per month. How much is the listing price?
$274,900.
Where is this house?
Knoxville, Tennessee,
Oh, you're moving south. Okay, I like that.
by the mountains.
Very affordable. And remember we talked about cost of living? So this house, we have 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, has a really cute street name, so I'm assuming it's probably maybe a quieter street. You could let the kids play outside. It's quaint. $250,000. How much do you think a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house would be right near a city?
Like 600.
Forget it.
Boston, Los Angeles, New York
Forget it.
City. You think it might be a little bit more expensive than $250,000?
Let's try 600, 750.
Right. So what other things go into the decision to buy a house in a certain area? So you have the house itself, right? Does it have enough bedrooms? Does it have enough bathrooms? What else?
Like depending on, you know, what kind of people live there. If they like the city life, they might live closer to a city. If they don't, they might live in, you know, suburban town with like a quiet street.
So lifestyle.
Yeah.
What about in regards to work? What's something,
How close? How far away from your work you are?
so people think about commute,
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
right?
Hosted.
How do people get to work a lot of times? So public transportation, is it near a subway? Is it near a bus system? What about some of the other aspects of a house?
The neighborhood, if there's crime.
Crime? expand on that. So if you had children, what's something that you'd
I
be
don't want them to get hurt or get involved with a bad crowd.
okay?
Yep.
So the type of neighborhood, schools,
And also
Schools, yeah.
taxes too.
taxes. So
Yeah,
Oh,
we
they
want to live in a
kill
state
you.
with no income tax.
that's kind of a catch-22, right? Because you want to have lower taxes, but you also want to usually have a good school system. So if you're paying into that school system and then you still decide to send your kids to private school, something that could be a challenge, right? So what else? We think about how many car garages we need, closet space. Anybody want a large walk-in closet?
Oh, yeah.
I think that'd be nice.
So I can hide my gun.
And weather too. Like if you're if
right.
you've been living in the you know, West Coast, it's like nice and sunny all the time, and then move into the East Coast where it's cold and rainy and can be pretty brutal during the wintertime. It's kind of shocking and not.
Or what are some things that we've seen around the country?
And
hurricanes, natural disasters,
Fires?
If you live near water, you gotta consider like the weather patterns of like where you live, because then like it could be a lot of flooding, like maybe some like tsunami.
Also, if you're in a place where there's like lots of flooding, your homeowner's insurance is more expensive.
Gotta get one on
Exactly.
a high ground, house on high ground, so
The
the water runs
stilts.
away.
Get a
Okay.
treehouse.
A lot of those factors determine how much we're going to pay. What do you think would be a reasonable price? And take into consideration, again, how much you thought you were going to make over the course of your lifetime. What do you think a reasonable price to pay for a home is?
Probably between
24 million.
$300,000 to $400,000.
$300,000 or $400,000.
Yeah.
You're going to make a lot of money somewhere.
For a first home.
Hopefully.
$24 million. All right. Well, don't forget about me when you're a
I
multi-millionaire.
won't.
Okay.
I definitely won't.
What are you thinking for home prices?
Like 200K.
Okay.
Like 200,000, 250.
Okay. You plan on living near a large city?
Yeah, I want to. Not like maybe not in, but you know, close.
So
commute.
did you find any houses that looked kind of like your ideal home online?
Not in my price range.
I
Right.
did, but way over my price range for sure.
How much?
Well, I put in exactly what you said, all the bedrooms I wanted and the bathrooms, considering I might have a couple of children by then, and the place I wanted to live in. It was over $5 million home.
$5 million?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can't do that. And it said the mortgage would be 21 grand a month.
$21,000 a month.
A month, yeah. No
Wow,
way.
okay.
So I can't do that.
So you're a little shocked by the sticker price.
Yeah.
How do most people buy a home?
Real estate agent?
How do they afford it?
Alone.
A loan. What's that loan called?
Mortgage.
A mortgage. What would be the ideal way to buy a house?
Cash.
Pay off.
Does anyone have a couple $100,000 sitting in their bank account?
Nope.
Sure, some people
Last
do.
time I checked.
I checked this morning and I still didn't have it in there, so maybe I'll check again after this class. A lot of people have to get a mortgage. And along with a mortgage, they have insurance. So if you don't own the house outright, most states mandate that you have homeowners insurance. That's the mortgage company protecting their investment, because they're looking at the risk of, are you actually going to make your payments? And what happens if this house burns down and now I have no asset, right? There's no asset tied to this loan. There's also something called PMI. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So mortgage insurance is basically an insurance amount that you pay on with your monthly payment if you don't have at least 20% equity in your home. So there's an insurance on the fact that you could default on your mortgage payment. So they get all of these different costs kind of built in. And then there's what else? So we have the principal payment that's going toward how much the loan is. We may or may not have PMI. We have interest. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, you're borrowing money from the bank, so there's whatever the interest rate is it'll keep accruing like as you continue to pay it off.
Right, and a lot of times in the beginning of the mortgage, when you first start paying it, the interest amount that you pay per month is significantly higher than the principal amount. So say you had $2,000 per month mortgage, you might see that you're paying $1,500 a month in interest and only $500 a month to principal. Sounds a little crazy, right?
Yeah, a lot of money being thrown around.
And so over time, you start to see those numbers shift, and toward the end of a mortgage, and sometimes people have them for 15 years, 20 years, or 30 years, the larger amount of your payment is going right toward principal, and eventually, hopefully, I flip the page, you pay it off. And that's kind of what do people call that? You buy the house, you pay it off.
Freedom.
Freedom. The American dream, right? Like, we talk about the American dream. You own this house, and now you have this great asset that's hopefully going up in value every year, and you don't have a payment. But you still probably should have insurance on it, and you're still paying taxes. And to your point earlier when you said, does the price of the house change? Taxes is one thing that can continue to go up. You'll see people who are in retirement impacted by that because they have their mortgage paid off, but their taxes keep going up. If they're on a fixed income, that can hurt them. So what's something that you need, and I think you mentioned it, what's something that you need to get approved for a mortgage?
Good credit.
Good credit. So this is when some of those decisions that we made early on impact us down the road. So we're in college, we open a credit card, we spend all kinds of money, maybe we're buying everyone rounds at the bar. And then you come out of college, you realize that you might not be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at your first job, right?
Right.
And you say, you know what? I have some student loans to pay. I have, I don't know, some vacations I want to go on. I don't really need to pay back that credit card, right? I need to pay back that credit card bill. So what happens?
It just builds up.
Continues to go up in interest. What else happens?
Credit card debt.
So you have credit card debt.
Your credit score goes down.
Yeah.
Exactly. The credit card companies do not care that you don't feel like paying their bills. As your credit score goes down, you may be sitting there saying, I don't care. I have an apartment, I have a car, I have all of these things. And then one day you stumble upon your dream house and you're like, hey, I want to apply for this loan. I want to get a mortgage. And you realize that maybe your credit score is in the 500s. They're not going to give you that loan, right? So this is when we look back and say, it is so important to be responsible and proactive from high school, college, because some of those decisions can really impact you down the road.
Another thing that comes with the joys of home ownership is protecting your property. If you have a mortgage, you will most likely have to have your own insurance on the property to protect it from unexpected losses or damages.
Let's talk a little bit about insurance. What is insurance?
You give me a little money now, something bad happens to you, we give you a bigger payout.
Okay.
Or you get sick, you're covered.
And what is that kind of bigger picture?
I don't know.
It's an investment to protect yourself from risk.
That's the word I was looking for. It's a transfer of risk. So what we're doing is we're paying a company so that we can transfer the risk from ourselves over to them. In the bigger picture, the money that you pay every month or every year is very small typically compared to the coverage that they offer. Give me an example of that. So with homeowners insurance, how would that work?
If you pay homeowners insurance, you give them a little premium every month. Oh no, your house is flooded. Well, great, because you're covered. And so they'll usually pay for the repairs. Well, if you can get a claim in, they'll usually cover the repairs and anything associated with damages, et cetera, et cetera.
And what are some things that can happen to a home or at a home that you might need to make a claim for?
Tornado,
Tornado,
Robbery.
flooding,
hurricane,
Fire.
robbery. Yeah.
Infestation.
Ooh, and what kind?
Yeah, let's say you get let's say you live in Florida and some hornets decide we're going to turn your walls into a
Bats.
giant hive.
Bats. Raccoons.
Okay, so we have a lot
Have a
of
little rodent up in there.
rodents.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but what about if somebody gets hurt while you live there?
Well,
it depends on the incident,
it
right?
depends. If they got hurt at your house, are you sure homeowners would cover that?
So under homeowners insurance,
Because I'd lawyer up right away.
lawyer up. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's something called liability insurance. So a lot of times as part of the homeowner's policy, there's not only the actual content or the structure itself, but there's a liability component. What's another kind of insurance that a homeowner may buy? You mentioned this earlier.
The umbrella.
The umbrella insurance. Does anybody know what that is?
It sounds like it covers everything.
Sounds like it's just
Sort of a general.
Sometimes in the insurance world, things are very confusing. This is one of those times where it's like, couldn't be more straightforward. It's an umbrella, a blanket of coverage that goes over not just your home, but some of your other personal properties. So we've talked about some unexpected things that can happen, right? We talked a little bit about maybe property damage, something happening to your home. What are some other things that can happen? You're an adult, maybe you're married, you have kids, you have a job. What are some things that could pop up that, despite your best laid plans, they kind of throw you off course?
You can get sick.
You can get sick. Okay, what kind of sick?
cancer.
Really sick.
Really sick. Okay.
Like
Cancer.
You could
Cancer.
get you could get like lead poisoning.
I've
Like
been
the
there.
water
Wasn't
bottle, the
fun.
water bubbler at work. You've been working there for 5 years, drinking the water, and then you just like suddenly start having symptoms and you get sick really fast. And
Okay.
Your
And how does
IQ
that?
drastically drops?
From mold in the house.
yeah, mold in the house. You get
Oh,
bit
yeah.
by something.
Divorce.
Yeah, that'll do it to you.
No, divorce.
And you have to split up your beanie baby.
Heartbreak.
Beanie baby.
know?
Okay.
collection.
So we
Or a
have.
family member gets sick and the responsibility falls on you.
So you could get sick yourself. Someone who you're responsible for, maybe a spouse, a child gets sick. You
Your
become
mom.
a caretaker. Parents.
Someone passes away.
Someone dies suddenly.
Yeah.
Divorce. You have to split up some assets. What else?
Oh,
Pregnancy.
Surprise.
Oh,
There
good
you go.
one.
That is a good one.
Something good.
Maybe,
Something
maybe not.
happy.
I don't know. So let's talk about divorce a little bit. What do you think causes divorce?
Disagreement.
Greed.
Greed.
Not good communication.
Okay.
Finances.
Infidelity.
Yeah. The, I guess, most amicable thing would be just that you kind of grow apart and you're like, this isn't for us. But the top two reasons for divorce are money and infidelity. So you hit them right on the head. So is it safe to say that money causes divorce?
It
More the
factors
lack
in.
of.
It factors in. That's all.
Factors in. How
the,
so?
The pressure of having to, like, especially if you have a family, you have the pressure of bills and then just the upkeep of the house and then feeding the kids and then trying to keep your spouse happy at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just hard because you're now supposed to be in a very, very sacrificial role where before, when it was just the two of you, it seemed easier. But I feel like even, you know, as you grow together, you accrue more things into the relationship. It's the stress and the pressure that causes them to
Yeah.
want to just
Be on the
jump
road.
boat.
Yeah, okay. That was really great. Thank you. It's so the stress, sometimes it's not having enough money because something unexpected happened and all of a sudden you just can't maybe pay the bills or you're not agreeing on certain things. So like we talked about before, remember when we went through the priorities exercise when you were kind of finding your spouse? It goes back to that, right? So you had mentioned communication. So having clear lines of communication, making sure that you're checking in with each other.
But that your priorities are constantly aligning with each other, because who you married, as she said before, who you marry in the years before, I believe that whoever you marry, like who they intrinsically are, will remain. But as the years go on, it's like you have little additions. They won't be who they were before. Who they are, and like deep down inside, will be who they remain. But time is going to add knowledge or add feelings, and so
Experiences.
you're
that
gonna have
change
to
you around.
fall in love with that person over and over and over again. But
Yeah.
it'll be harder with the just like the seasons of life and what you're both going through. So each time you're gonna have to go back and see if your priorities, not just your own individual priorities, but if like both of your priorities are still complementary or align with one another.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so think
Communication.
about some of the things that we've been doing, right? At the beginning of each lesson in the simulator, we go through and a lot of times we do what?
We assess
Assess the
ourselves.
We assess ourselves and we reorder our priorities, right? So we're doing that as an individual. What if you go in and you kind of drastically change your priorities, but you're not really having that conversation with a spouse? So over time, you've mentioned that adventure has been a top priority for you, right? What if your significant other agreed with you when you first met, traveled the world, and you went to all these different places and you were, I don't know, what's a big adventure you want to go on?
There's so many. Wanna hike Patagonia.
Okay, so you first start dating, you're hiking every weekend, you take a week off in the summer, in the fall, and you go away. As you go through these different phases of life, maybe you continue to keep adventure as a top priority. What happens if your significant other all of a sudden says, it's not my priority anymore. I want to have a family. I want security. I don't want to travel anymore. I weirdly developed a fear of heights. What do you do?
You divorce them easily.
Well, you have depends. You have I guess a conversation about seeing what kind of compromise you can reach where you can both be living your life together with the priorities that you both singularly have at the top of your list. Like if you can travel, but also have security or be starting to think of a family.
Okay. Yeah, so that's great. So just something to keep in mind, right? Because as we go through these exercises, the reordering of the priorities is actually what will happen in real life. Because right now it just seems pretty easy. We just move them around, but you may be subconsciously or unconsciously doing that as you enter different phases. And if you're not having those conversations, or at least you're not realizing that that's what's happening, it can really create some tension in a relationship.
Job loss is a real game changer.
So let's think about a scenario here. So picture that you have worked at a company for 20 years. You are a manager there or a VP. You've helped them bring in a lot of money. You've trained some of their top salespeople or some of their top managers. You love it there. You're comfortable there. You have a great commute, right? And one day, your boss calls you into his or her office, and you sit down, and they say, so we're going to do some restructuring. And you think, maybe that means I'm going to get the raise that I've been working toward, or maybe I'm going to get that new office that I wanted. What do you mean by restructuring? But you can tell by the look on your boss's face. It's probably not good news. It's happened to me, actually. I was 2 years into my first job, and I had started at kind of a crazy time in the financial world, and they said, we appreciate all your hard work. We know that we have frozen the promotions and the raises and all these things, and we are actually moving all of your jobs to Kansas City.
Oh.
But we are not inviting you to go. But you know what the nice thing they did was?
What?
They asked us all to go out and train the people who were taking our jobs. But they're going to pay for our hotel when we went out there. So these things really happen, right? Like you've seen this happen in your own lives. What's something you can do to prepare for? Because now we've talked about kind of personal and relationship unexpected events, financial unexpected events. Something could happen to your house, something could happen to your job. What's something that you can do to make sure that you're prepared kind of for the unexpected?
Start an emergency fund.
Good job. I didn't give her that answer, by the way. Talk a little bit more about that.
You want to have like a cushion. You want to have something to fall back on, just in case things don't work out. So you always want to be contributing to that emergency fund as you go along in life, and you're paying for all these different things. You can't forget about plan B.
Okay, great. So people talk about an emergency fund. How much should you have in there?
You should have roughly enough to cover rent at least for 6 months.
6 months of just rent?
Well, what about your food? You gotta
Food,
stock
medical
up,
expenses. You should probably have 6 months. Yeah, enough to cover your living for 6 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
so costs of living, or what's another term that we used for those expenses that we can't really change?
Fixed expenses.
Fixed expenses, right? So sometimes they call it kind of the bare bones expenses. Like if you didn't have income coming in because you lost your job, you were sick, hurt, whatever it may be.
Oh yeah, break your leg, can't work for like 2 months.
Right.
You gotta eat, you gotta travel, you gotta do all these things.
So it's important. We went over in, I think, one of the earlier lessons, we went over what is the most important or kind of the bare bones essentials. So it could be your rent or mortgage, it would be groceries, conservatively groceries, utilities, you need to keep the lights on, you need to keep, what else, the heat on, or the air conditioning. I don't know if that's considered essential, but I think it is. And so these are some things that we know we kind of can't live without. And if you have children, multiply that, right? You have yourself, maybe a spouse, some kids that you're responsible for. What happens if you don't have an emergency fund or you don't have that cushion?
You're unprepared for the worst.
You're unprepared for the worst. What can actually happen in your day-to-day life?
You can get foreclosed. Your house foreclosed. You can get your car repossessed.
So a lot of times people get nervous about saving and they say they kind of can't save or they can't find the room in their budget to do it. What do you think is more stressful? Trying to find ways to save and be proactive, or ending up in one of those situations where you're panicking?
Ending up in one of those situations, because I've definitely been there and it's like so horrible. It's like you can't, you have to like, when I was in Chicago in college, I was working like every day after class and like on my days that I didn't have class. But I couldn't save any money because like where I was living, it was so expensive. I had to buy like a new winter coat because the winter like in Chicago was way worse than in like Boston. So I had to buy a new winter coat. I had to buy new like winter boots, and that was really expensive. And I had to buy like food every day, and it's just like you can't win.
Yeah, it just kind of snowballs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the earlier we can start being proactive and create a pattern of savings, the better, because then you just get into that habit and you don't feel it as much because it's not like you have to all of a sudden pay for something unexpectedly. You can say, okay, I assumed that some of these things were going to happen.
Would you say that like putting aside like 10% is like a good amount?
So we typically look at 20%.
20?
20% into some sort of savings. So that could be the emergency fund if you don't have any money set aside. Once you have your emergency fund built up, that kind of cushion of money, then you can start looking at other ways to save or invest. So we look at 50% for lifestyle, and part of that is those fixed expenses. And so it has to, if you make saving a priority and you put it kind of first in line, then something else may have to give. And that's where you look at, am I more concerned about security? Am I more concerned about having this money in the bank and having that sense of peace of mind, right?
The easiest way, I think, to save money is to just stop getting takeout. I think people don't realize how expensive takeout is. And in college, people get takeout all the time, and it adds up very, very quickly.
Just because it's late and like they don't want to they're studying and it's just like a quick solution, but it really does impact your finances.
Yeah, going out a couple nights a week, it adds up. If you look at all of the moving pieces and you say, well, I need to save, it's not after I live my life, I have $100 left over and I put it in the bank somewhere. It's I'm making the conscious effort to make this a priority. So I'm going to save first and then build how my lifestyle will be after the fact. You have, like you said, insurance or all student loans, some of these things that you need to pay, and maybe on a weekly or monthly basis, you say, well, this is how much I can put toward kind of the fun money. And this is a bad word, right? What happens to people sometimes if they can't pay their bills and they may or may not have lost a house? What's a word that they have to file?
Bankruptcy.
Anybody know what bankruptcy is?
No,
Oh, yeah.
not the definition, not like the exactly what it is, but I know the idea.
Concept.
It's like, the concept.
Do you have to give all, like, everything away, basically? Or, I don't know.
So you default on all of
You have to
your
liquidate
debt.
all your assets.
So bankruptcy is essentially you default on all of your loans and you just say, I don't have enough money to pay for it. I can't do this. And you figure out a way to settle, sometimes with the credit card companies or whoever you owe money to say, you know, I will maybe pay you back a certain amount, or they may garnish some of your wages, but it's a way for people to kind of get a fresh start. That is like end of the road. It should never be a goal. So we want to focus on being proactive, having an emergency fund, having that savings account, and making sure that the decisions that you're making continue to be in line with your priorities, but you're not going overboard.
Buying a home is one of the most expensive financial decisions the students will ever make. So it's helpful for them to be honest with themselves and make those decisions based on their priorities after evaluating the pros and cons. Remind them not to buy a house just because other people they know are buying homes or because it's supposedly the American dream. And despite all of our best laid plans, things don't always work out exactly as we hoped. But having savings set aside in an emergency fund can help you when life's challenges arise. Now you're ready to move on to Lesson 7 of Money Experience Teacher Training.